On the morning of March 3, 2026, a big rig hauling leafy greens rolled over on eastbound Interstate 8 near Yuma, Arizona. The driver ended up pinned underneath the truck. Fire crews had to call in a full technical rescue, thousands of pounds of produce scattered across the desert shoulder, and they shut the entire eastbound freeway for roughly 3 hours before they could cut the driver out and airlift them to a Phoenix hospital. To most people, that's just another highway accident. To a truck driver, it's a Tuesday on Interstate 8. Because here's the thing that makes Interstate 8 different. Ask a four-wheeler about it, and they'll tell you it's a pretty desert drive. Ask a professional driver hauling 80,000 pounds, and their jaw tightens. This 350-mile road attacks the exact things a loaded truck is worst at: stopping, staying upright, and surviving heat. And it does it on a route most freight drivers cannot legally avoid. This is why truckers fear Interstate 8. The fear starts in the mountains east of San Diego. After climbing through the Cuyamacas, Interstate 8 drops nearly 3,000 feet in about 11 miles on a long, sustained 6% grade. For a car, that's a fun downhill. For a fully loaded semi weighing up to 80,000 pounds, it's the single most dangerous thing a driver does all day. Here's the physics that keeps truckers awake. On a descent this long, you cannot just hold the brakes. Gravity pours energy into 40 tons of moving steel faster than the brakes can shed it. That energy becomes heat in the brake drums, and once those drums get hot enough, the brakes simply stop gripping. A failure called brake fade. It doesn't matter how new your brakes are. Push them past their thermal limit and you have a runaway. That's why trucks on this stretch are legally held to 35 miles per hour. Why drivers are trained to crawl down in a low gear, letting the engine do the braking, and why there's a gravel runaway truck ramp waiting near the bottom at Ocotillo, a deliberate dead end for rigs that already lost. There's an old saying among mountain drivers: you choose your speed before the mountain chooses it for you. On Interstate 8's western grade, the mountain is always ready to choose. And the terrain is so severe, the road can't even hold itself together. Eastbound drops through Incopa Gorge, while westbound climbs through Devil's Canyon, the two directions separated at their widest by nearly 1.5 miles and an entire mountain between them. Survive the breaks, and Interstate 8 introduces its second threat, one that can end your career without a single scratch on the truck. Because that whole descent happens in California, and California treats truck drivers differently than any state around it. While most cars on that highway can do 65, California law caps every commercial truck with 3 or more axles at 55 miles per hour, statewide, under Vehicle Code 22406. And the CHP is notoriously strict about it on the Interstate 8 grade, where gravity is constantly trying to push you over the line whether you want to or not. For a trucker, a speeding ticket here isn't just a fine. Drive 15 miles per hour or more over the limit. And under federal rules, that's classified as a serious violation. Rack up 2 serious violations within 3 years, and the FMCSA can disqualify your commercial license for 60 days. 2 bad moments on a downhill and you don't just lose money, you lose the right to work. Your truck, your income, your career, parked. So on Interstate 8's western grade, a driver is fighting a war on 2 fronts at once. Fast enough to keep the load moving, slow enough to save the brakes and the license. Get it wrong in either direction, and the road wins. And then, at the bottom, the air itself picks a fight. Those same canyons that make the grade so steep turn into something else, a wind tunnel. On one side sits cool, dense coastal air. On the other, the hot, low desert. When that pressure difference equalizes, the only path is straight through the gaps Interstate 8 runs in, and the air accelerates like water through a nozzle. Back in 1966, the CHP estimated winds through here hit 100 miles per hour, above the 74 mile per hour threshold that defines a hurricane, produced on a clear day by geography alone. For a truck, this is a specific nightmare. A 53-foot trailer is essentially a giant flat sail standing 13.5 feet tall. A crosswind that a sedan barely notices can shove a high-profile rig across a lane or flip it entirely. It's exactly why, when the wind gets bad enough, Caltrans posts advisories along the corridor, and high-profile vehicles get barred from the road altogether. And the cruel twist, an empty trailer is worse, because there's no weight inside to hold it down. A driver can be running perfectly legally and still get picked up by the wind and laid on their side. Mountain, badge, wind, and Interstate 8 hasn't even reached the hot part yet. That's where the trucks start blowing tires. Past the mountains, the road flattens into the Imperial Valley and does something almost no other freeway does. Near El Centro, it drops below sea level. You are hauling freight down into one of the lowest stretches of interstate in the country. Then you cross the Colorado River into Yuma, and Yuma isn't just hot. According to the World Meteorological Organization, it's the sunniest place on Earth, logging over 4,000 hours of sunshine a year, with the sun out more than 90% of all possible daylight. Yuma's record high is 124 degrees Fahrenheit. In summer, the asphalt itself becomes a heat source. For a loaded truck, heat plus weight equals blowouts. A hot road and a heavy load push tire temperatures up until a weak tire lets go. And a steer tire blowout at highway speed on a fully loaded rig is one of the hardest things in trucking to control. The heat strains everything else too. Engines, cooling systems, brakes that never fully recovered from the grade. And out here, a breakdown isn't an inconvenience. In these temperatures, it's a genuine survival situation. Which is why every guide to this road says the same thing. Carry far more water than you think you need. There's an irony baked into it. This blistering valley grows roughly 90% of all the leafy greens Americans eat from November through March. So, the road is packed with refrigerated produce trucks, like that leafy greens rig that rolled near Yuma, hauling lettuce out of the hottest farmland in America, on tires cooking against the sunniest pavement on the planet. Now, Interstate 8 attacks the one resource a trucker can never get back: time. East of Yuma, this is some of the emptiest interstate in the country. Arizona's longest stretch of interstate with no exit at all sits right here, 21 miles with no way off. Between Gila Bend and the end of the road at Casa Grande, there are 60 miles with essentially no services, no reliable high-flow diesel, no food, and critically, nowhere legal to park a big rig. For the entire 350 miles, Interstate 8 crosses only one U.S. route the whole way. It is a genuinely lonely road to break down on. That emptiness collides with the trucker's invisible enemy, the hours of service clock. A driver only gets 11 hours of driving inside a 14-hour window before federal law forces them to stop. Every delay on Interstate 8, every crawl behind a struggling truck on the grade, every wind slowdown, burns minutes off a clock that doesn't pause. And Interstate 8 has one guaranteed delay built in. Westbound near Pine Valley sits a permanent Border Patrol checkpoint that funnels roughly 7,000 vehicles a day through inspection. Every truck stops. Some get pulled to secondary, and because this entire corridor runs within the 100-mile border zone, a truck can be selected for a full DOT inspection at any time. One that can put the truck out of service on the spot if something's wrong. On Interstate 8, you can lose an hour you didn't have to a stop you couldn't refuse. Mountain, badge, wind, furnace, clock. And the road saves its most lethal trick for the very end. As Interstate 8 runs its final miles across the Sonoran Desert toward Casa Grande, it enters one of the deadliest dust corridors in North America. The threat is the haboob, from the Arabic hab, meaning to blow. It's a wall of dust thrown up by thunderstorm winds, and it is enormous. These walls can be miles wide and thousands of feet tall, rolling across the desert at 20 to 45 miles per hour. The danger is that a haboob can drop visibility to near zero in a matter of seconds. One moment clear highway, the next a total brownout. For a truck, this is the worst possible scenario, because you cannot stop 80,000 pounds quickly. A car can brake and pull off. A loaded rig needs the length of a football field or more to stop. And if it stops in a live lane in zero visibility, it becomes an invisible wall for everyone behind it. This exact corridor, where Interstate 8 feeds into Interstate 10 near Casa Grande, has produced some of Arizona's worst chain reaction pileups. Wrecks where passenger cars slam blind into the back of trailers and end up wedged underneath the semis. Rescuers have described these scenes as war zones, sometimes unable to even land medical helicopters because the dust was too thick. The official advice tells you how bad it is. If a wall of dust hits you, pull as far off as you can, stop, turn your lights off, and take your foot off the brake so nobody drives blind straight into your taillights. Then, finally, Interstate 8 ends at a quiet junction with Interstate 10, as if it hadn't spent 350 miles trying to take you down. So the obvious question, if Interstate 8 is this hostile to trucks, why don't drivers just take another road? Because for a huge amount of freight, there isn't one. Interstate 8 is the direct freight spine connecting the ports and city of San Diego and the produce empire of the Imperial Valley to Interstate 10 and the rest of the country. To move that freight east, a truck has essentially one corridor, and that corridor happens to run over a break-melting mountain, through a hurricane-force wind tunnel, below sea level, across the sunniest furnace on Earth, and into a killer dust belt. Every gentler route is blocked by something worse. Truckers don't drive Interstate 8 because it's a good road. They drive it because it's the only road. And that fight is older than the interstate. A century ago, this same terrain forced people to build the first freight road across the dunes out of wooden planks, the old plank road of 1915. 6.5 miles of lumber laid over the sand so early trucks could reach Yuma. The desert buried it constantly. Crews dragged the planks back into place with mules, and eventually the sand won, and it was abandoned. Its wooden bones are still out there under the Algodones dunes today. That's the real reason truckers fear Interstate 8. It's not that they're not tough enough for it. It's that the road was shaped by geography to punish exactly what a heavy truck is worst at, and they have no choice but to run it anyway. Hauling the nation's winter lettuce over a route that's been trying to swallow freight for more than 100 years. The plank road lost that fight. Every driver on Interstate 8 is just the latest one still in it.